Hey everyone, today we're looking at how the entity affected the characters of DBD. The entity altered the trajectory of many of these characters' lives. Whether that comes in the form of direct intervention or more physical alterations varies, but is present in almost every one of their cases. So let's explore how the entity changed every one of the killers. Evan McMillan, or the Trapper, is an interesting one, and being the first killer had a lot of intervention it seems, although largely indirect. Evan had his life influenced by the entity from a young age. It's suggested in the lore that Evan's father Archie was being influenced in some way by the entity, causing him to act so cruelly and even murder both his wife and brother. There are moments too that Evan has where he seems overcome with a darkness, however he actually manages to push back in many of these cases, and even stops himself from doing terrible things. This doesn't last once he finds out about the truth of his mother and uncle's deaths, but that resistance is there. After the mining cave-in, in the realm, I imagine he's physically unchanged at first. The outfit and weaponry he wields is all his doing, that's not entity given. One of the outfits, the Marrow Miner, reveals his prototype version he made, maybe before the realm, and the one we have now is the one he made in the realm. Like a messed up Iron Man refining his suit that he made from scraps. The hooks within Evan's body have always been a suggestion of Evan maybe once being a survivor himself, potentially a punishment for his disobedience. The hooks look painful, carving into his skin, and after time it seems he gave in, but isn't completely turned. There's a mobile cutscene where we see his defiance firsthand, with him literally swinging his cleaver at the entity's claws. Evan's always had this conflict with these father-type figures, or figures of authority really, I suppose. So this punishment seems likely for his lack of obedience, something that happened because of his father's influence over him, a reminder of him too I imagine, which is likely why the entity does treat him this way too. Philip, or the Wraith, was born in Nigeria, experiencing the civil war there as a child, losing his parents and grandparents. These instances seem down to the war, and not because of anything the entity does. If anything, it more so seems that the entity takes interest in him because of the events happening to him, causing a strong emotional reaction. It's only when Philip kills the soldiers who killed his somewhat adoptive mother and mentor for Nunya, where the entity seems to directly influence him. We can assume therefore after this, with his move to the US, that everything is sort of part of the entity's plan, potentially even his eventual employment with Azeroth, which only scars him further. These events contribute to how he appears in the realm, a husk of his former self, which likely gives him the name the Wraith. His wielding of the bell is important too, because it was something his father made for him before his death, and was meant to be used to warn his village of soldiers approaching, which Philip fails to do in his lore when the time comes. The meaning behind the bell therefore could be almost an alert to the survivors, warning them of the danger coming. It's also likely representative of a death toll. The bell in the realm gains additional power when marked with special entity symbols, and appears to be imbued with the entity's magic, which provides Wraith his ability to cloak and briefly enter the spirit world when doing so. Billy was barely changed by the entity seemingly. He became a killer through his parents' mistreatment of him on their farm, Coldwind. They treated him badly and locked him away at a young age, left in a small room with just a TV, occasionally letting him leave to slaughter the farm's animals. Once a man, he snaps in anger and slaughters everyone, taking over the farm and later mysteriously disappearing. Billy's higher than usual strength seems to just be natural, with the only thing that may be entity given is his running speed with his chainsaw, mentioned to be superhuman by Benedict Baker. Nurse may not seem to have been interfered with initially when looking at her lore, however in her tome lore there is some suggestion the entity was playing with her mind and very much waiting around for her to lose it somewhat. It's even possible the entity is responsible for the presence of the Broken Woman. Later, after the massacre at Crotus Pren, it's highly likely that the mysterious ambulance crash was caused by the entity too, with Sally not seeming to be in a state to do this. Based on her outfit, the accident, it's also likely Sally straight up died in this crash, but was transported to the realm and repaired somewhat. She was given supernatural powers, and the ability to use the breath of her victims to glide in and out of the spirit world, an intensely painful but powerful ability. She's further able to telekinetically float. Visually she appears mostly unaltered, with most of her her body covered, and the visible skin seeming burned, likely from the fire that broke out at Crotus Pren. Myers is seemingly different looking than in the original Halloween. He's a little bulkier and broader, however that may just be a multiverse thing happening there and not entity intervention. As for his in-game power, it's sort of hard to gauge changes made, as he physically appears the same still, and his power more came in the form of his seeming immortality, which is hard to judge when the survivors lack weapons. Hag or Lisa's life is changed a lot as a result of the entity. It's unclear how closely tied the hexes are to the entity, but hex magic ultimately does summon the entity to help Lisa, and is suggested to get her friend killed too, which makes me think there is a connection. Lisa is captured in the swamp and is about to die when she scratches a symbol into the ground, which seems to cause the entity to transform her, or maybe the hexes I suppose. This is why it's a little confusing. My thoughts are that it is the entity, as the symbol that Lisa's friend does on her hand is the same Elodie uses in her lore that gets her taken, so they seem one of the same. This means the entity caused Hag's transformation, causing her body to grow stronger and her arm to become more claw-like. All of her physical alterations seem down to the entity, and her ability to survive despite her injuries. If the hexes are tied closely to the entity, there's a good chance the entity was considering Lisa for the realm for a long time, and her use of the symbol was just a sealing of the deal. Doctor is a case in which he appears to be pretty untouched by the entity before and after entering the realm. The one main change it makes to Doctor is giving him the inexhaustible spark within him that allows him to constantly shoot out electricity, a physical change. Huntress is a character who seems unchanged or affected by the entity. She's a character who is strong and a capable hunter as a result of both her mother, who was those things too, but also because of her required need to survive within the Red Forest. After her mother's death, Anna had to survive, and so her strength, raiding ability, and whatnot all seem a result of her adapting to such extreme circumstances so young, and not because the entity did something to her. Bubba has very little altered about him, both during his life and physically. The main thing changed by the entity is its presence over him. It threatens Bubba to make him obey, with this being evident in things like his add-on, the Beast's Marks, entity claw scratches on Bubba's chainsaw. Freddy seems largely unchanged. The main difference he has in the realm is an alteration to his abilities, which are nerfed in some places but enhanced in others. We don't get the specifics here, but stuff like the Dreamworld for example performs very differently, and he lacks control. Amanda or the pig is unaffected by the entity during her life, and in the realm also kind of unaffected too. She can now actually growl, like make a growling sound, which is odd. Her traps are also adjusted slightly with the new game they're made for. Clown is a character that seems completely untouched by entity intervention, simply having the desire to kill and following through with it. Even in the realm, he's not really altered, and is one of the most grounded characters out of the whole roster. Spirit is one up for debate, I think. Her tome lore has her enter these states of anger which are presented as a dragon rising up in her, seemingly her ancestors. This is never really clear if it's the entity's doing, or if Rin is actually connecting with her ancestors somehow and letting out that famous Yamoka rage. I would sway more so to the entity intervention, sort of prodding her to let her anger out, and disguising it as Yamaoka rage. Although in fairness, her power flavor text does seem to suggest it's just sort of her inner family rage and not the entity, so I don't know. The entity also almost definitely is whispering to Rin's father, who hears dark whispers when he's at his peak stress and begins to crack. This is one of the many things that causes him to try to kill both Rin and her mother. He only fails with Rin as she gets taken, making a deal with the entity. In the realm, the entity changed her a lot, making her into its own version of an Onryo. She has blue skin, her limbs connect through magic, floating about, and a blade can be formed from the shard lodged in her hand. She's further capable of entering the ethereal plane, allowing her to phase around the trials. Legion as a collective don't appear to be all too changed by the entity. In terms of their physical power, it seems to be more conceptual. The power itself states now they draw power from the thrilling freedom of not abiding to any rule but their own, meaning they haven't even even really been changed in the realm either. It's just their freedom that's causing them this power, which is kind of funny because they're not free at all. The one Legion character we get suggestion of that might have had some entity influence or a sort of push at a critical moment is Frank, the leader. When they are found by the store clerk vandalizing the store, he gets a dark impulse, which causes him to attack the clerk, later leading to the group ending up in the realm. Adiris, or the Plague, is quite heavily changed by the entity, with her life taking on a completely different trajectory with its intervention. When her mentor Haban asks her to leave Babylon with him when he loses faith in the gods himself, she is about to join him. However, she hears a whisper that convinces her otherwise, which is undoubtedly the entity. She then sacrifices Haban and leads her people later as High Priestess. After a plague hits the city, she leaves with her loyal followers, and in her dying moments is taken. In the realm, she is merged with the Plague and is able to wield it to her will, it seems. Maybe a constant reminder of the people she failed. Ghostface seems untouched by the entity prior to the realm, with him only really changing by getting some floaty bits on his costume upon entering it. Demogorgon appears unchanged from its Stranger Things version, with it only having a different and more convenient means of using its portals within the realm, sort of a fake upside down. Otherwise it's fairly similar. Oni, despite his rage and many kills, doesn't seem influenced by the entity. He's just naturally very angry. When in his dying moments the entity takes him, in the realm is where he's really changed. The entity preys on his hatred for the name Oni Yamaoka in order to get more emotion from him, transforming him into the very thing he hates, an Oni. He now wears an Oni mask and carries all the core features of an Oni, like the horns and blue skin. Deathslinger appears to be one of the least changed characters and doesn't appear to have been subjected to entity intervention during his story either. The entity doesn't even go so far as to repair his injuries like his broken jaw or leg, which it often does for other characters. This is likely because it adds to the emotion that Caleb creates, with those being reminders of his former life, struggles, pain, and need for revenge. Executioner is only really nerfed, it seems, when in the realm, in order to make the trials work. The entity didn't have to manipulate him into the realm or anything, with him simply contacting Pyramid Head with its fog. Blight is one of these technicality type characters where the entity isn't necessarily directly responsible for really any of Talbot's lore, but it is definitely indirectly responsible, as most of it happens as a result of the entity and its realm existing. However, despite Blight's very transformed state, none of it is really its doing, I would argue. It's more Talbot's own doing. Maybe we could accredit the abundance of Blight serum and plants, and so the eventual transformation of Talbot onto the entity, as when we see Talbot briefly in the Void cutscene, he seems relatively human still, prior to his journey into the fog and eventually the trials. Charlotte of the Twins does not seem to be changed. Her life prior to the realm was affected by the Black Veil, a cult of entity worshippers. However, the Black Veil's actual ties to the entity don't seem solid, meaning the death of Madeline, her mother, and later her brother, were the cult's doing and not the entities. In the realm, she is physically altered somewhat, having the ability to now grow a whole new Victor each time he is kicked, in a near instant. Victor died prior to coming to the realm, and so the Victor we have in-game is more than likely a complete construction of the entity, potentially even made using entity matter, the auric cells. He acts and behaves similar to how the old Victor did, but it seems he isn't the actual one. Trickster didn't seem to have any entity manipulation happening during his lore, and even in the realm, his flavor text for his power attributes his fast speed to simple skill, meaning he may be unchanged entirely. There is maybe some suggestion with this line, "I lost my friends, and I fear I'm losing my mind. I see awful things behind closed eyes. All that guides me through the dark fog is turning my pain into sound, pouring the throes of death from my heart to a song." This is said by Ji-woon to Yun-jin, and right before, he says he's doing it as he knows how to play her. However, the way he specifically describes this time as a dark fog is definitely interesting. Nemesis doesn't have his story affected prior to the realm. The main changes he undergoes in the realm seems to be nerfs, especially to his adaptive capabilities and mutations, with him only mutating a small amount and evolving his tentacle through regular gameplay. compared to the much more extreme things that occur in Resident Evil 3. Cenobite wasn't affected by the entity prior to the realm, with him only appearing as a result of following the box. It is possible the box appeared in the realm as a result of the entity, however it's not overly clear. In the realm, Pinhead does seem nerfed, however he is still able to do many of the things he's able to do elsewhere, like his summoning of chains from the labyrinth. Artist is one of, if not the most changed characters. Right from the start of her lore, the entity appears to be the cause for her brother's death. It's also later her savior when she's on the bridge, with crows appearing. The entity seems ever present and hanging over the life of Kamina. After being captured by the Black Veil, losing her hands and tongue, her captors and friends are all killed by the crows that have followed her throughout her life. By the time she reaches the realm, the entity has altered her physically by providing her with ink replacements for her removed body parts, and she herself has become reminiscent of a crow, taking on many bird-like features from her sounds to movement, and ability to summon crows, her power. Sadako is unchanged by the entity, aside the changes made to her to lower her power for the trials, and alter it somewhat to make the 7 days into a 7 bars type deal. The entity saves her from the well, or so it seems, with a huge wave, and that's about the biggest intervention it does for her, but is all that's needed to get her to join it. Dredge again has ties to the Black Veil, but it doesn't seem the entity directly. The Fold, a community led by Otto Stamper, a member of the Black Veil, is what summons and is consumed by Dredge. However, this doesn't seem to be the entity's doing. In the realm, Dredge is a nerfed down version of itself, seemingly, being less powerful and expansive than when out of the realm. Wesker seems mainly altered in the realm by the fact that Ouroboros works differently. The way it's held at bay without need for the suppressant is a bit different. In the realm, he seems able to handle it without this. The main change the entity did was providing him with infinite available sunglasses. Knight is a character who gains most his skill and strength from training and experience. The first time the entity intervenes appears to be at the very end of his lore, where it protects him and the boys, and allows them to survive longer than they would have when fighting the army. In the realm, this translates somewhat too, as Tahos appears slightly undead, or at least fairly pale beneath the mask. It's kind of hard to tell due to him being covered head to toe in armor. He's further given the ability of summoning the guards, who seem to have almost definitely died, taking on more ghostly forms and only coming out when Tahos needs them. Skull Merchant is another relatively human character that doesn't seem altered by entity intervention. In the realm, all that's changed about her is the behavior of her drones. Singularity doesn't seem to have entity intervention in his story as far as I can tell. The mysterious crystal that gives him sentience could, who knows, have been planted there by the entity. It's unlikely, but not impossible. Personally, I think it's just Hux's doing, and that's what makes his story special in that sense, is that it's technology focused. He's advanced, it's not to do with magic necessarily, like a lot of other lore is. In the realm, I don't think the entity adjusted him really, with him mentioned to be fairly destroyed after Gabriel's attack, which is how we see him in the realm. Maybe he's no longer able to adjust his biology as he was before, and is restricted into his current form to force him to remember his defeat to the hands of a human, which will drive him. Xenomorph is only really changed once it's in the realm, being adjusted to work for the trials, and overall nerfed, I would say. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and be sure to let me know your thoughts too, down below. Thanks, and goodbye.